Hiya, good fishing folks. Welcome back to Fishing with Seth and Maine Sport Outfitters. Happy to be here with you pondside today, so nice to be back on terra firma for this episode of Fishing with Seth. I'm here to show you 3 different techniques this morning, but really to talk about catch and release and how we let go of the fish that we don't intend to harvest in a safe way that takes care of the resource. So I'm gonna start with a little bit of fly fishing near the surface. Then we're gonna experiment with a worm underneath a bobber of sorts. And lastly, we're gonna finish up with a large soft plastic bait on an offset worm hook with some spinning tackle. Great to have everybody here. Look forward to detailing these in the following video. So to begin with, fly fishing is our first catch and release fishing method. I've got a basic dry fly here tied to the end of the leader, and this is your standard upright and divided wing kind of classic dry fly, something that you've seen from centuries ago and still current and effective flies. And we do have some mayflies hatching from the pond this morning, or really it's a little tan bug, I can't quite tell what it is, but the fish are rising for it. I've put a little bit of floatant into the hackles and the wing and the tail of this fly, and that's a dressing that actually keeps the fly waterproof, so when it lands on the water and gets waterlogged or gets eaten by a fish and then released, and we release the fish, we can dry the bug back off and it'll float on the surface. I've also taken the barb down on the hook in anticipation of releasing the fish that I catch. Even if I wanted to take the fish home for dinner, I might catch multiple fish that I don't intend to harvest, and I want to release them unharmed so we can take care of, in this case, our little pond. And we have some new rainbows that were recently stocked, so we're kind of welcoming them to the pond environment with a little bit of harmless play, if you will. Okay, so I'm gonna go to the water's edge and cast and try my luck. Notice I've got plenty of this brightly colored fly line here off on the grass. I need to have that line handy in order to start fly fishing. In other words, it can't be stored on the reel and start casting, because then I have to chirp line off the reel as I'm in the casting motion. So having the line onto the deck some way that's free of snags, or more or less free of snags, is a good way to just get started. So I've got about what I estimated to be 20 feet of fly line here. And I'm just gonna start by inching out a few bits of line. That first cast was a flop, which I'm just gonna leave. So the fly's just landing there and it's kind of rolling around in a little bit of current in the pond, but I'm hesitant to just remove it quickly because sometimes that will actually spook the fish. So there's a bunch of little short casts just right off the lawn here, basically a rod length of line or so. Now I'm going to work out a little bit more line and get the fly out there away from me. So I'm simply watching where the fly is on the pond, keeping the rod tip low, waiting for a fish to come up and see if that's something they really want to try or not. So fish in a pond or a lake like this, they cruise around looking for their food, and I just have to keep my eyes peeled so when they cruise around and they see my fly, and if they think it's the real deal, they might come along and try it on. So this is an antique rod we have on display at the shop, but it works perfectly well for this type of little fishing scene. So I'm going to make another little cast over in that spot, and that's about 20 feet of fly line and about 9 feet of leader, a really typical cast. And I see a few trout rising around the pond, but nothing exactly eating the fly. So I'm gonna try to get their attention in this big natural food formed environment by skittering the fly. So I just move it a couple of inches and then let it sit. And hopefully that lets them know that there's something there to go check out. So I'm gonna give it another moment just to be found, hopefully. And even though we've got all our preparations in place and we've got a good dressed fly out there and a barbless hook, oh, there was a little rise right next to the fly, but no take. So I'm gonna see if I can make it jiggle one more inch to make it really kind of look alive, like it's a little bug kind of popping out of its exoskeleton about to fly away. And no luck there. So it looks like the new trout and the bass in the pond are not exactly willing to eat everything, so we kind of have to dig into our little bag of tricks here. So I'm going to pull some line in, switch over to a spinning rod, Well, as you caught on, the fish were wise enough to not recognize the fly as food. And these are recently pellet-fed rainbow trout from a hatchery, so they're pretty, you know, they're pretty wise to what food looks like. Just gonna take this opportunity to thread on a worm for everybody's benefit here. So we've got a small snelled hook under a little piece of yarn, which is kind of a fly fishing strike indicator, but nonetheless a good version of a bobber. And I have the barb off the main portion of the hook, but there are still bait holder barbs on the hook. So I just skewer the worm on in a couple of different places onto the point of the hook and get it up around the corner. There we go. So it's up near the eye of the fly. So if they do just wiggle on, or if they bite onto a little bit of the wiggly tail, it won't necessarily come right off the hook, and then I'll have a chance to set the hook and catch that fish. So undoing my leader is always a challenge here, and I just want to make sure I've got the line running straight off the rod for my first cast. So I'm just testing the drag here to make sure that it's set in some way so when a fish grabs it will stop them. And I'm going to go ahead and make a cast with this and see if we can't get one on. I'm going to crank in a little here, make it a little bit shorter. And this is tricky because this is a very light setup, so no split shot or anything like that. So I'm just going to try to get a few foot cast, not much there, and let's see if that's long enough to fool the fish. Whoa. Sometimes this happens to the resource. We get a little anxious. Here's a perfect example of a little guy, a baby largemouth that we definitely don't want to hurt. And just by turning around a little barbless hook like that, he's unharmed. And back into the resource, he goes. And lastly, we are going to attempt to catch one of the bigger pond inhabitants with an artificial soft plastic bait on an offset worm hook. So another already debarbed hook, nice sharp point, ready to fish, into the nose of the bait, and then out as soon as the bait gets up to the point of, or past the barb of the hook. And then when we get up to that offset portion, allowing the worm to flip over, maybe some of the worm goes up over the hook knot itself. And then I measure again where the bend of the hook is. I pinch that point and bring the hook point through. And I really want to see the hook point come out the back of the bait, and then I'm actually going to hide it back in there. So really weedless, totally weedless rigging. And with a simple little spinning rod like this, it really is just about kind of pointing and shooting. So I'm going to try to find a spot in the weeds, cast it down the line. This is right in next to shore, so just a twitch to come in tight. I'm going to let it settle, twitch, and I'm either feeling for a pull or watching the line swim away. Oh. So even the little guys were trying to hang on. This bait is about their size, but you know, they're evolved to eat everything they can and grow big quickly. So re-rigging an offset worm, this is often how it will come back to you, either when you've caught a fish or a fish has tried it on. So resist the urge to just rip the bait off and actually coax it back into shape. So push the head back onto the offset portion or even up over the knot of the hook, and notice how quickly it just goes right back into basically being ready for action, ready to fish. So one way to just make your baits last a little bit better is resist the urge when they get messed up by the fish to just pull them off. Well, as the drizzle is setting in on us here, it's probably time to sign off for now. And we thank you for your attention as always. Come on down and take advantage of this great catch and release opportunity with the youngsters that you've got in your life. We've got trout in here, we've got bass, as you know. Though I wasn't able to catch many this morning, they really are in here, so it's good fun. Make sure to take those preparations, debarb your hooks, and of course, if there was any fishing content that you missed or you want to see our previous episodes, follow the links here and you will find some great programming. Bye for now, everybody. Thanks so much.